Pretty simple little raise and take it there. Kings under the gun as a raise. And something like jacks would be probably not a raise. Three bets small with trips. So when he goes smaller, he's more likely to be strong, is the moral of the story. I have to call anyway. If I hit 3 kings, I could stack him. Or kings up, I could win a nice pot. Pretty standard button raise with queens. There's only 3 of us on the table, so it doesn't have to be that strong necessarily. It was a fairly small 3 bet there, wasn't it? And that's pretty small as well. Which kind of suggests 2 pair. Desperately try and get called by what's obviously a single pair. I think if he had a misdraw there that he was semi-bluffing, he'd go bigger. Well, in a different situation, from a slightly different position, I could open for a raise, but I've opened like 3 pots in a row, which means I'm more likely to be getting action. You know, with the wider ranges of hands calling me and stuff, so it's not as if I have an ace in there. That's the thing with your flush draws, if you're going to semi-bluff them, be more inclined to do so with one that has an ace in it. Because you could get called by a pair of queens or kings, miss, hit a pair of aces and still be good, so it sort of gives you a little bit of extra equity. This is a min raise. Call, which means I'm getting a good price. To there. Okay. Wow, how did he not value bet that? He's got to know that a pair of aces is very possibly in one of our ranges, and he's probably getting action for a pair of aces. People normally 3 bet trips, so just because this guy drew 2, you shouldn't be too afraid of trips there. You should definitely be betting for value. And of course, some of the time, there'll be somebody in my situation, like maybe had a pair, jacks or something, turned into 2 pair, and then might call a bet as well. So there's definitely scope to extract some value with kings up there. He was just scared away from doing so because one of his opponents drew 2. But you've got to think about the whole story. If they didn't re-raise before the draw, more often than not, they're not going to have trips. It's not impossible, but more often than not, they won't. They'll have something like a pair of kings with an ace, a pair of aces with a king, a pair of queens with an ace perhaps. And just have a pair of aces that might call another bet, considering the number of cards he drew, the raiser that is. Okay, be nice to win one. It's an interesting one there because if he raises, I'd probably have to fold. He's almost certainly got a pair with an ace kicker there. And I've almost certainly got 2 pair, maybe disguised trips. A lot of the time, so if he re-raises, it's normally with aces up or better, isn't it? It's hard for me to beat anything he's betting for value when he re-raises after the draw there. Even though kings up looks very strong, you know, it's all relative. And it's better to do this semi-bluff with an ace in my hand, because I could always miss and hit an ace and still win. Yeah, fair enough. It's nice to know that he's willing to call with just a pair there. It's worth noting. Means I can value bet wider. Let's go up here. 240. I'm getting like almost 5 to 1. Almost 5 to 1. I mean, in 5-card draw, a pair will improve about 25% of the time or so. So if I'm getting 3 to 1, and it's against one player, you can start to think, well, maybe I could call, but even then it's not really enough because you might improve to a hand that's still second best and get into trouble with reverse implied odds. So, you know, if I was getting 5 to 1 and it was just 2 of us in the pot, maybe I could call. But you shouldn't do it with 3 to 1 pot odds, and maybe not even 4 to 1. Unless you know your opponent's opening with a lot of pairs, and you can mix in some sort of bluffs where you just lead out. So he called me last time in this situation, so. But let me think, he's drawn one card, so he's probably got a misdraw as well. Which means King Queen High will be good a reasonable amount of the time. Maybe I'm good like half the time. Yeah. And the thing is, like, because he's seen me turn over a misdraw in that situation before, he might even just get ballsy and call with ace high when I bet there, so for that reason it's probably not worth betting to try and force him off another misdraw. He seems aggro apparently. I think I have to call. He goes one, so let me think. Why does he go so big? That pretty much excludes disguised trips from his range. It should exclude strong two pairs, which means he either has like a draw or a weak two pair. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you bet a normal amount pre-flop and a normal amount post-flop, you can include disguised trips and all two pairs in his range, which makes his range more value heavy and probably means I have to fold, but because of the ridiculous sizings of his raises, it tells the story about where his hand is a lot more clearly. It allows me to make the call. I mean, sometimes people bet really big pre-draw like that with a weak two pair that they just want to protect and don't really know how to play it. But then there's also a lot of draws in their range there as well, so it sort of makes his range quite bluff heavy. Okay, I think that guy's been fairly quiet so far. I don't think I have to get involved here. Even with a pair of aces I would, of course. Kings is tricky. I mean, because he's been quiet so far this opener, I'm probably never ahead with kings. Oh, okay. He's got a straight draw. Okay. I am ahead with kings. But it's good to know. To know that he's capable of that will help. Ace draw one. Did he bet after the draw or not? That's important to know. Got a feeling he didn't. Yeah, he didn't. Pretty sure. He draws one, the other guy draws one, and he just gives up. I mean, that's another reason why you should try and be making those semi-bluffs with an ace in your hand, because if the other guy calls and draws one, I mean, you could just check there and then win the pot when the other guy checks back with ace high. Whereas with, like, you know, going for 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing, you end up with 10 high. You've now got to either bet to try and force possible other misdraws at the chop, or just check and lose to other misdraws, which is kind of painful. 320, it's not like better than 4 to 1. hand is 4.2 to 1 against hitting, I believe, so pretty much getting the right price without even considering implied odds. Okay. I'm going to try this. Okay. Fair enough. I know this guy's called me down when I've done it when it's just in a heads up pot, but it looks a whole lot stronger when you draw one and then lead into two people, one of whom has like been the aggressor pre-flop. I mean, I think this guy, Arcus, would probably have like re-raised if he had two there, so he's likely to have a draw which he's normally going to miss. And Seppi is normally not going to improve on his pair, so it puts him in a really difficult situation when his pair doesn't improve, and I can often win the pot just by leading out. Because it just looks like I should never really be bluffing there, and I can never really have a bluff. But Arcus shoves and renders the whole discussion pointless, really. So we saw earlier this same player opened really big with a flush draw, or a straight draw, whichever it was. So even though it's a button raise and it can be quite wide, you do know he likes to go a bit bigger when he doesn't want any callers. So a min raise sort of sets some alarm bells ringing. It's not a definitive tell on where his hand's at by any means, but and we know this guy can open 3x with draws like he did earlier, and he has drawn one again. Previously he then checked when another opponent had drawn one, and now he bets rather than checks. He probably removes missed draws from his range, really. But then I have to fold based on what happened earlier against this guy. I mean, he could have decided to change it and mix it around a bit, but when he did that before, he missed a draw, and even when he had no high card whatsoever, even when his opponent could have easily had a missed draw himself, he wasn't tempted to try and steal the pot away with a bluff, so probably brings like two pairs and disguised trips more into the focal point of his range and pushes missed draws out. It's just a nice little 5x raise, which is like bad play no matter what he's got. I mean, if he's doing like the same thing that Arcus did earlier, like with a missed draw, you just kind of like give your hand away a bit to any decent player who's thinking, really. I mean, you wouldn't play trips that way, because so often you're forcing everybody else to fold, and he'd know that, which is why it takes like good value hands out of his range. But you know, if he does have a genuine hand, like trips or two pairs, it's just bad play because he's just losing out on a huge amount of value. Yeah, I think from this position, that's a no. Maybe jacks or tens could get curious from the blinds. Or maybe you could just get two callers and then a shover in the big blind. Anything's possible. Under the gun, this is a bit awkward. This is one of those where I'll limp, but to balance my range, I have to occasionally limp with hands like big trips there as well, which I do. I mean, if you only ever just limp with like tens or jacks that aren't quite strong enough to raise for value or bet for value, then you're going to be very readable, and people just raise to force you off the hand. If you occasionally do it with strong trips as well, some of the time you'll let the blinds stay in the pot with hands like really small pairs, which might then improve to trips and pay off a big bet after the draw. So you're not really sacrificing a lot of value by limping a big trip sometimes in those situations. Not as much as you think anyway. Okay. You know, sometimes when you let the blinds into the pot by limping with big trips, those smaller pairs could even make a two pair and call a bet as well. So you can extract more value that way. And if you're only doing it with big trips, it's far more difficult for you to get outdrawn. Because really, like, if you've got something like trip kings and somebody's drawing three cards with a smaller pair than kings, they're going to end up beating you like about 2% of the time. It's such a negligible amount of the time that you don't even have to worry about letting them into the pot. But for the same reasons, you shouldn't be limping hands like 3-2s, 3-4s, 3-6s. If you let like a pair of 7s, 8s, 9s into the pot, and they hit trips, you end up costing yourself a really big pot. So if you're going to balance your range by limping 10s or jacks occasionally in those spots, where you can't really kind of open for value, then that's the correct way to balance it. Occasionally limping big trips as well. Not that I'm advocating limping as a playing style in most situations, but I think there's an advantage there. Yeah, so like 400, almost, a little under 400. I'm getting like better than 4.2 to 1 anyway, without even considering the amount of chips that might go in after the draw. So. Yeah, I was thinking of trying to just lead out again, but I mean that's the thing. Like even if I've got mid to weak two pairs and you lead out there, they're beating nothing that you can possibly have for value, given the way you played it. It puts them in an ugly spot, even if they've got like two pairs, unless it's a strong two pair. But even then, like it's not an easy call. Not if they're half decent player anyway. This guy's open 3x again. I know he can do it with draws. Jacks, well, you can open 3x money position with jacks. Good to know. See here, I mean it's not the strongest trips, but it's just about enough to limp, to balance my range when I'm limping like a pair of 10s or a pair of jacks in early position. So I'll go 2 like I would with a pair of 10s or a pair of jacks. And then just bet 2/3 pot and hope he's improved enough to call. And if he folds, then I've lost nothing, because if I'd raised, he would have just folded anyway before the draw, so no problem. He did this earlier and threw 1. Really not that strong. Okay, I'm going to go with 10s. Well, I got lucky, but there we go. Actually, perhaps I shouldn't have called, really. I mean, I'd seen him do that once, draw 1, but I never got to see what hand he had, so I've got no reason to really assume that he has draws there all the time, but late position, who's not overly deep stacked. I think there's still time for rebuys. Late reg ends in 7 minutes, so yeah, like close to the end of re-entry phase. Sometimes people like shove a lot wider and stuff when they're short, just to gamble it up a bit, but I don't think I had enough information to necessarily call with 10s there. Maybe that was a mistake. Okay, he's done that a couple of times, so it's time to 3-bet. Now I've got enough of a hand to beat most missed draws. Oh shit. Would you really play like a 2-pair that way? Like if you had a 2-pair here, it looks like I'm just checking for pot control with a 2-pair I'm calling with. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense for you to have a 2-pair really. I think just a call there. As for this guy, Jack's up is a tough spot now really. going to go with it. I mean, with a razor and a flat caller, there's a fair bit of incentive for somebody to raise light. He could even be 3-betting with a worse 2-pair. I wonder what we're doing now. He shoved. You shove, do you? I mean, my hand looks like it's quite possibly a 2-pair. I do believe him. I mean, even if he had like a misdraw and he picked up a pair, or he had ace high or something, like, if he's a decent player, which he seems to be, he can be checking some of those hands. He was out of position when he 3-bet. I mean, sometimes that can be a slight indicator that people are more likely to have a genuine hand. That one did feel a bit more genuine. I mean, the 3-bet size wasn't massive either. Was it like 2.6x? Given that there's a razor and a flatter, 3-betting to 2.6x isn't that big, really. I mean, if it was fairly light and wanted to steal the pot, he could very easily have just shoved, put the rest of his stack in. The fact that he went a bit on the smaller side perhaps is a bit of an indicator of value, I think. So that's factored into my decision there. Yeah, this video has been running for a while, so I think I'll stop it here. I might make another one shortly.